can hear animate. The clang of metal reverberates all along the scaffolding. The voices coming from the other side fall silent.
Who's there? Is that you, Maurice? Who said communist? Did we say communist? Get out of here.
For a moment, silence.
What's the passphrase?
There's no response. You begin to wonder whether they've slipped out some back way. No, they're still there. You can feel them back there.
All right. The key's taped to the back of the door frame. Just make sure you put it back when you're done, or we'll all be locked out. And do watch the concrete. It just kind of falls away, in places.
Charmant. After you, detective.
Have fun at your underground meeting, pig. Hope it's a blast.
The two young men are either oblivious to or ignoring your entrance. Their attentions are fixed on whatever it is they're stacking in the middle of the floor. Matchboxes, it appears.
I think he's holding Ulexis.
It is. It's holding.
Careful, careful. Damn, hardly any difference. You two, you are late.
They should know the meeting starts at 10 p.m. sharp. Hey, Esteban, isn't that your jacket?
What a coincidence. You two have the same jacket. What are the odds? Based on the prevalence of white Sarah-Mauritian suits in Martinez, extremely low.
It certainly looks like my jacket, Ulexis. Where did you get that, gendarme? Unlikely. That's real Sarah-Mauritian twill. Only old Sarah-Mauritian communists and drug smugglers wear those anymore.
He is neither of those, of course. He is simply a poor student putting on airs. Also, he doesn't have the shoulders to fill out such a jacket.
See, Uli? It's just like Mazov wrote. How does it go again?
Those committed to the rights of property are those most apt to violate them.
Just a minute. Steban, Ulexis. Why do those names ring the faintest of bells? Probably because they're the real names of Nazteb and Exilus, the authors of that so-called essay about Tip-Top Tournay you read. You should get to the bottom of this when you have the chance.
I assumed it was Maurice who broke into my room to play a trick on me. I didn't think I'd actually been raided by the RCM.
There is surprise in his voice, naturally, but is that a note of excitement you also detect?
Oh, gendarme, because this is perfect. Can you imagine the look on Morris's face when he finds out the RCM has been kicking my door down?
He'll shit himself. Positively.
And now they've shown up in force to break up our meeting.
Something tells me these young men are not very experienced with law enforcement.
The RCM wants to join us?
My partner, of course, is acting in a strictly personal capacity, not as an official representative of the RCM.
Interesting. Does that mean you've done the reading?
Uh-oh. No one said anything about reading. You'll just have to wing this one.
No, detective. The only reading I've been doing is right here.
He seems to be wagging the notebook at you, as though he suspects you may have forgotten why you're here.
I have not had time to seek out pretentious communist book clubs, nor have I done their reading.
It doesn't sound like they've done the reading, Staban.
Well, this is getting awkward. I'm not sure what you're expecting to find here then.
There's profound consternation in his voice. You suspect it's about something bigger than your not having done the reading.
Maybe they can explain themselves.
I don't think so. Unless you've been hanging around the Cultural Studies faculty at the École Normale de Révachol.
Perhaps he subscribes to La Fumée.
That's sarcasm. He does not expect you to subscribe to radical communist periodicals.
You've read our article.
That I did not expect.
The energy in the room has shifted ever so slightly in your favor. They're afraid they've somehow embarrassed themselves in front of you.
Well, don't keep us on tenterhooks. What did you think of the essay?
The delicate egos on these boys. Even though you're just some cop, they're desperate for your approval. Hey, you're not just some cop. You've got highly developed critical faculties. Now's your chance to show them off.
Well, of course that's just an initial foray into the subject. We're hoping to return to it for a more substantial treatment next term. In any case, I'm glad our piece found its audience. That's always the hope with these things, you know. In the most generous sense, I would say we're cultivating revolutionary consciousness.
Yes, that's probably the best way to describe it.
But more specifically, we are running a reading group. The most rigorous and theoretically advanced materialist reading group in Martinaise.
Comrade Staban is a great discussion leader. One of the best at the university.
It's obvious they take this group of theirs extremely seriously. Whatever you do, don't compare it to a common book club.
That's our whole thing. The world is so shallow, all noise and repetition. We're interested in genuinely radical critique.
Precisely. We are not interested in senseless parroting. We like to read critically.
Within the contours of Mazovian historical materialism, of course.
As though you can call that problem teaching.
One thing you learn quickly at university is that you're not going to find a real education in any lecture hall or discussion seminar.
We are post-attendance, basically.
Exactly. The only worthwhile part of the so-called École Normale de Revachol is the library. That's where we've made our greatest critical strides.
They are not primary school delinquents, they are university students. Attendance isn't compulsory. Besides, we are not the skip squad.
The Counter-Truancy Task Force, or Skip Squad, is the division of the RCM that drives around in wagons looking for delinquent minors. It's generally considered a punitive assignment for underperforming officers.
We study all the foundational texts of Mazovian theory, of course. Just last week we finished the second volume of Puncher and Watman's Innocence of Capital.
Truly extraordinary.
And before that we spent 6 weeks on State and Plasm.
Uh-oh. You can feel your attention span rapidly deteriorating. Your attention detaches. The voices of the young men fade away. It's a cool evening, you notice. Out beyond the dull chatter, you catch the sound of a distant seabird, and of course, the sound of the large stretches of canvas that cover the missing sections of wall. The way they billow in the night breeze reminds you of something. The thought is almost too much to bear. What you wouldn't give to glimpse the bare legs behind it. The more it hurts, the more you have to have it. Slowly, too slowly, the pain fades from your side. You turn your attention to the two young men, who appear just about finished.
And before that, there was Abelard's Impé Infernal.
But, of course, our special emphasis is on the theories of Ignace Nilsson and his followers, especially the inframaterialists. You're not familiar with him? It's pretty advanced stuff. You may not be ready for it yet, gendarme. Only Krasmazov's most trusted lieutenant, the evangelist of the revolution, and the founding father of the People's Republic of Samara.
It's hard to overstate how unimpressed he is that you've never heard of this world historical individual.
He also happens to be the greatest communist theorist after Mazov himself. It was Nielsen who first postulated the existence of ideological plasm, which forms the basis of inframaterialist theory.
The young man sighs. His companion looks about furtively.
Lynching? No. We're not an operational cell.
We think of ourselves as more of an intellectual vanguard.
Our stance? What? Does he want to know if the SRV has established a party line on the lynchings in Martinez?
Though historically speaking, the SRV has supported direct action against right-wing paramilitary squads, especially when they are doing the Indo-tribes' dirty work.
Good point. So as a provisional matter, I can say we support it.
Are they being sarcastic? You feel like you're caught in some elaborate joke labyrinth, but it's impossible to see your way through. It's always that way. Beneath the crust of irony, there's a molten sincerity that threatens to erupt forth. You may witness it yet.
No, we're an independent organization. We acknowledge and respect the Union's efforts, but our interests are more theoretical than Mr. Clare's.
He speaks the truth.
That's easy. Crime is simply the inevitable expression of the injustice and incoherence embedded within capitalism itself.
Delivered with the smug assurance of a schoolboy reciting a maxim he's committed to memory.
It's a symptom, in other words, not a cause.
His companion can barely suppress a yawn.
No, unfortunately, the communards were hunted down and killed nearly to a man. All that's left of them are bones and old rifles.
His companion's eyes widen as you hold up the ancient weapon. He's practically itching to stick that thing in someone's face and pull the trigger.
Yes, like that one. I wonder how many of these are still lying around in cellars or sealed up behind the masonry. Can I hold it? It's heavier than I was expecting.
Though what, exactly, you can't say. He turns the rifle over again, admiring the glint of light off the oily barrel. When he's finished, he returns the rifle to you with a nod of appreciation.
What do you mean? This is the reading group. We're in something of a rebuilding phase.
Some of our former comrades didn't have the ideological fortitude our work demands.
Intellectual attrition is maybe the best way to describe it. Felix said he couldn't keep up with the reading on top of his classwork. And Susanna wanted to read text other than Mazovian theory, like novels, if you can believe it.
Imagine the audacity of wanting to read a novel in a reading group.
We've tried recruiting new members, but unfortunately the current intellectual climate is pretty hostile to inframaterialist thought. These days, if you're on the left, the ascendant schools are the Godwaldians and their iconoclasts.
Don't forget about Maurice and the turnips.
Right. Then there was the whole turnip debacle.
Whatever this turnip business is about, one thing is perfectly clear. These young students have a much deeper understanding of communism than you do. You could learn a thing or two from them. If you can convince them, you're one of them.
They're the most depressing school of communism. They love writing long books with a patina of Mazovian theory to cover up their cheap psychologizing.
A gang of cheap psychologists and intellectual midgets. Typical Godwalders, in other words.
It's okay for Uli to say that, because his dad is from Gottwald. The Gottwald school believe that intellectuals as a class are capable of sparking revolutionary change. So all they can do is critique capitalism from inside itself.
In other words, they have lost faith in their own relevance.
That's why they spend all their time smoking cigarettes and writing long works of criticism that make you want to commit suicide. It is miserable. That's probably why they're always committing suicide. You see, the Gottwald school look like communists. They talk like communists. But scratch the patina and you'll see beneath that they're just depressed liberals who've read too many books. For starters, they love talking about beans. Oh sure, but iconoclasts are obsessed with beans. They love thinking about beans. They love counting beans. But most of all, they love building models to predict how many beans there'll be in the future.
Nota bene, iconoclast is an extra pejorative form of the already pejorative name Mazovian economists, a moderate school of Mazovianism which advocates the gradual transition to communism through carefully managed economic modernization rather than violent social revolution.
They're by far the most bean-centric school of communism.
Ah yes, the much maligned bean counters, ensconced in their think tanks and high-rises, believing they can save the world through a series of incremental, assiduously technocratic reforms.
If only. They've got all the beans accounted for in their asset sheets, their quarterly budgets, their future projections. But for some reason, there are never enough beans to go around. So we've just got to cut our bean rations in half.
And next thing you know, there are budget cuts, so now we've got to cut the bean rations in half again. You see, iconoclasts claim to be communists, but in reality they're just liberals with hard-ons for spreadsheets. For starters, they love talking about beans. Oh sure,
Nota bene.
they're by far...
Ah yes, the much maligned bean counters, ensconced in their...
Oh please, there's nothing moderate about their love for counting beans. If I were a Gottwaldian, I would probably diagnose them with Bonenfixierung. You see, iconoclasts claim to be communists, but in reality they're just liberals with hard-ons for spreadsheets. Of course not. The only people who actually call themselves liberals are mouth-foaming reactionaries.
Basically indistinguishable from fascists. You'd need an X-ray machine to tell the difference.
Cindy is... how to describe her role?
Something of an ideological auxiliary, perhaps.
Yes, that's exactly how I would put it. And naturally, we support her radical counter-liberal aesthetics.
But she refuses to submit an essay, so we can't call her a member of the group per se.
That doesn't stop her from using a room for studio space, of course. It's an unfortunate story. You see, our ex-comrade Maurice is something of an economist.
He's studying macro and microeconomics.
Wow, a real intellectual, it sounds like.
Right. So a few weeks ago we were discussing the extra physical capabilities of the revolutionary state. And Maurice said... what were his exact words, Ulex's?
It was unbelievable. He said, turnips don't care if they are grown by communists, moralists, or Vulcan. They grow just the same.
Basically, he was rejecting the whole foundation of inframaterialist theory.
What is this inframaterialist business they keep blathering about? You've never heard of anything like it.
Simply that under suitably revolutionary conditions, crop yields naturally increase relative to non-revolutionary crops, which Maurice somehow has the gall to deny.
Susanna said that he has been hanging out with some non-communists lately.
For us, the question boiled down to, if you don't even accept the basic ideas of Nielsen and inframaterialist theory, why are you in the reading group? Exactly. What educated person could believe that turnips grow at the same rate under capitalism and communism?
It's a sad reflection on our educational institutions.
Well, it wasn't so much that he was expelled.
He just quit coming. We haven't seen him around for weeks.
Go ahead.
The young man frowns at the little pile of boxes on the floor.
Nothing, just messing around until the meeting started.
They're watching those matchboxes awfully intently for two guys who are just messing around. It's almost as though they were trying to create the most unstable structure they could, with predictable results.
We typically only accept new members once per semester. There's this whole process with essays and presentations on assigned topics. But given that we have some extra seating at the moment, I guess we could be convinced to expedite an application or two.
Steban, you can't be serious. For these gendarmes?
I am serious. As materialists, we've got to adapt to conditions as they are. Besides, he'll still need to pass the interview portion of the entrance process. Assuming he's even still interested, that is. Sure, we're here most every night. Maybe we'll catch you again.
Sleep well, gendarme.